Meeting is being recorded.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Bushin Lounge Radio Show, where we take timeless principles and apply them to every aspect of your life and life, business, ministry, and family, and everything encompassing it. I'm your host, Jason D. Murray, the sensei here. I got my business partner and good friend, JT, the preacher, the man, the
What's
myth, the
happening, people?
legend.
What's
Yes.
happening, people?
Yeah, what's up, man? I'm so glad we finally got together and we finally got to do this together,
Took a minute, didn't it?
and such and welcome to episode 7 where what are we going to be discussing today, JT?
Holy cow, episode 7 already. Well, episode 7 in the Bible is the number of perfection. So what a,
Yeah, right.
what a perfect week to join. You know, I was thinking as you were doing your opening that you can't separate none of those things. Everybody wants to separate them. They want to keep their business life over here and their family life over there, and what they think is their private life over there. It don't work that way.
No, no, it doesn't. It's all encompassing. It's all together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing that's hidden. It all comes out.
It all comes out.
May as well
Our
pull.
topic our topic today is talking about alignment in your financial house and building from the foundation up. But we're going to be bouncing around and getting to know each other. So JT and I have been in the financial services industry for quite a long time. I've been in it for, I guess, 2007, and I got licensed 2009. I was one of the short bus people, and I could say that because I did ride the short bus one time in my life. But but
One
the
time
short,
it was for a whole year, but it was one time. No.
yeah, it was one time, yeah, and so so I rode the short bus to work when I came in here and failed my life insurance exam 8 times. All right,
Well,
and then I finally got it through in 2009, and here we are today.
you just want
So yeah,
to make
so
sure you
there
do
you
it
go.
well.
What's up, JT? Tell me about you. When did you start? When did you begin in this great
So,
industry?
2007, I believe it was, Jason, right about the same time as you. And I did not. It's a funny story. I was I was badgered by somebody, and if anybody ever reads any of my posts, I talk about a lot about in our industry people being recruited to the industry that
Oh yeah.
otherwise had no interest in the financial services industry. Well, I was kind of one of those people, and guy badgered me, so I signed the paperwork to shut him up, and that didn't shut him up. So it took about 6 months for me to become interested. Actually interested. I did think about it. Like after I signed the paperwork, I thought about it for about 6 months, and then and it was really right at 6 months. It was the convention. They had that company had a convention in end of June, beginning of July. I signed the paperwork that weekend. Did not. I wasn't at that convention, but they came back from it. And it was about December of that year when I said, "Okay, I'll take the course and go ahead and get my license." So that got a couple years later, I got my Series 6 investment license, and I guess that's about 2 years later, and then been haven't looked back since then. Could have went forward a little faster, but haven't looked back. How about that?
That's beautiful. Keep it in your rear view, buddy.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So again, talking about the financial house, and really glad you're here and really talking about this. So talking about today doesn't just talk about your finances and your money. It's talking about your life and aligning your life with the principles of you hold true. Like JT and I are both believers. We love God. We love Jesus Christ our Lord, and we love working out things with the Holy Spirit in partnership with the Holy Spirit. And with that said, we truly believe that every principle that we discuss has to align with the Word of God, has to align with the Spirit of God. When I mean, am I right there, JT?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the challenge. I think people, probably one of the analogies that everybody knows about God is that people treat, him like a spare tire. He's in the trunk and they only pull him out on emergencies. So, financially speaking, a lot of times people only pull God out for emergencies too. It's like, oh, God, how am I going to pay this electric bill? Oh God, how am I going to pay this rent? Where the sometimes, and in my experience, what we have to do is we have to stop treating him like a spare tire, and we have to kind of yield our life and our finances to him. And sometimes that means, hey, we got to make a drastic stop. We got to take a timeout, call timeout, put it all on paper, figure out where we're at, make cutbacks. I've had times in my life where managing finances, you have, can't see my hands. Where you see my hands,
No,
you
no, I can see
a
it. Yeah.
mile's worth of bills due, and you have a quarter mile worth of finances, and something's not going to get paid. And so what happens is we make mistakes. We make the mistake of either not prioritizing in that moment, stressing over the three-quarters of the mile that we can't pay, and in the process somewhere we forget our obligations, which should be to give and to save and pay ourselves first, then pay our bills. And it's funny, but when you give out of every check, and then you pay yourself first and save money that you're not going to touch, then pay what's left. It's funny how that other three-quarters of a mile will catch up. You will catch it up, if that makes any sense. But what happens, I think, with some people is they don't surrender their finances to God, and they don't give a tithe. They don't give to, even if you're watching this, you're not a religious person. There's no limit of amount of billionaires and millionaires you turn on YouTube and hear, and they say giving was part of my master plan. They giving them, you can't outgive, and that's the truth. Now we're believers, so we believe it's commanded and we enjoy it, but at the same time, that's the first thing you ought to be doing. You ought to be giving 10% of your income, or what you can give something, then paying yourself. Then let's talk about the bills.
Yes, yes. No, that's great, and that leads us to kind of our next discussion when it comes, or our next topic when it comes to building the financial house, right? And we pull from the guidance of Scripture. We also pull from what we learned in this industry a long time ago. You remember those napkin presentations?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I was recruited initially into this industry off that napkin presentation, and then drawing out a little picture of a financial house, talking about what goes in there and where you build from there, and then to have your roof, right? And these aren't just found in Scripture; they're found in the principles that we experience in day to day life, right? The wisdom can be drawn from is good stewardship, legacy, making sure our families are built on that solid foundation, and that's our segue right there. So when uh, when I look at martial arts too, and a lot of you guys know martial arts, and bear with me here. I know it jumped a leg here about martial arts, but we actually talk about the parallels of martial arts with our spiritual life, our family life, and our financial life. Because if you don't have a good solid stance, and you don't have good solid stability, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have a good foundation in your stance, you're easily swept, you're easily thrown, you're easily taken down to the ground, and you're easily manipulated. And see, doesn't that happen in our lives all the time when we're not grounded and have a solid foundation, especially in our finances?
You know, so much went through my mind there when you were talking about that. First of all, let me comment on those napkins, okay, real fast. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it started out as a napkin presentation. You were sitting at, a lot of the insurance agents were sitting somewhere at a bar or a restaurant or somewhere, and it was drawn on a napkin, and then it went to a what they called a flip chart presentation, and next thing you know, the flip chart had 60 pages in it, and by the
Oh
time
my
I was
gosh, yes.
done and coming into my own on this company, I brought with me a notepad, and I literally would draw the financial house out on a notepad, and I was done with the flip charts and all that stuff. So came full circle on that one. But absolutely, a financial, having a right stance. There's two stories that remind me of, Jason. In the Bible, there it tells the story of the master that went away. That he left some money with each one of his servants. He left a little bit with one guy, a little bit more with the next guy, and a little bit more with the next guy, right? So
Yeah.
he comes back and he goes away for a long time. Now, keep in mind, when we go away nowadays, like I'm going to go to the next town over here in a minute. Before cars, it would have took me a day to walk over there, right? Now
Yeah.
I'll be there in 20 minutes, right? When this master goes away, he goes away for a long time. I mean, so a caravan down the Silk Road somewhere that he's gone. So he leaves his trusted servants in charge and he gives each one of them a different amount of money. So when he gets back off this long, long trip, they've had a lot of time to take his money and do something productive with it. That's all he wanted. He didn't, it's interesting to me. He didn't necessarily leave each one of them a specific goal, but he gave each one of them a specific amount. So they bring the one that had the most, and he had doubled his money. So the master rewards him, sends him away. So next guy comes along, he had the middle amount, and he had doubled his, and the master says, "Great, well done, good faithful service." Sends him away, he rewards him. The last guy that had the least amount, he says to the master, master said, "What'd you do with my money?" And the guy says, "Well, I know that you." It's funny. He says, "I know that you're a very fearful man. You're a very strong and powerful man, and I was afraid of you, and I didn't want to lose your money. So I dug a hole and I buried it, and here I have your money back." And the guy said that the master says to him, he says, "You're a fool." He said, "You could have at least put my money in the bank." In those days, they called it something different. They put with the treasury keepers or something like that, and they would have got what was called usury, which is interest. And he said, "You could have at least give it to those guys, and I would have got a little interest on my money." He says, "But you were foolish, and you buried the money." That guy had no foundation whatsoever in what he did with the master's money. Another story that reminds me of that, and then by the way, that's what we're talking about in those first couple of moves you make with your money each week, by having something that you give to God and having something you give to yourself before you do anything else. But there's another story. That's the wise man that built his house upon the rock.
Yeah.
You have the story of how there was a man that built his house on the sand, and there's a man that built his house on a rock, and the same thing happened to both guys. Both guys faced the storm. One guy's house was washed away, the other guy's house stood. And I think that's what we have to ask ourselves is, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to have something that, like you're talking about in martial arts, which I'm not a martial artist, but I can relate to that stance. And do we want to have a solid stance where we can defend ourselves, financially, spiritually, or do we want to just risk it? And the problem is, everybody out here is just risking it. They're just winging it. And that's why we see all these, GoFundMe's to bury somebody, and
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
fundraisers, and people asking for money. And I mean, could you imagine having to finance a funeral? What would be worse than have, and thank God I've not been in that position, but what could be worse than financing out your loved one's death or not being able to bury them? I know somebody right now, they could not pick up the cremated body of their loved one because they don't have the money, and so now they're
Wow.
wanting to GoFundMe. I mean, that's, and I obviously we're both in the financial services industry. We want to help people invest. We want to help people be properly insured. So it is I guess it is a priority to us because we see it more regularly. But if I could get it through to anybody's, if there was any one thing you could get through to anybody, it is get a foundation. Especially if there's a young person that watches this show, Jason, if they could get that foundation before they make those life decisions of marriage and children.
Could you imagine, like I did a life insurance policy for somebody who was 28 years old, right? You want to know how much they're paying on a $500,000 policy?
If I had to take a guess, I bet it's less than $50 or around $50.
Believe it or not, it was about $15.
Get out of here. How old were they?
28.
Oh, 28, not 30. Okay. I heard 38. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, 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 no.
Yeah,
28 years old.
that's amazing.
28. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
and they got they have the living benefits. They have the ability to, and adding a child rider was only going to cost them $4 a month extra.
Well, that reminds me of a plan that I frequently show young people. Every once in a while, I get a hold of a young guy coming out of college or what have you, and we'll show them that, especially a young guy or gal that's not married, right? I can show them how in 8 years they can save a couple $100 a month, and I know that's a lot of money. I get it for a young guy or gal, but if they would dedicate saving $200 a month for 8 years, they could put that money away, never touch it again, never add to it after 8 years if they didn't want to, and they'll have well over $1 million by the time they're ready to retire on an 8 year savings plan. I mean, if I had to do the dad thing all over again, right? Like now I have 8 children. I didn't know this stuff. I didn't know this stuff. My kids were mostly grown by the time I got to this industry. But if I had to know this all over again, I would have taught my kids this stuff in high school. I mean, like I would have been like in ninth grade. Okay, boy, you're going to save $200 a month. Okay,
Yeah,
they would have had it done well before, and they would have had that foundation. And with the way the market works, as you know, we're not allowed to overpromise on what
right,
the market can deliver, right? So
right.
oftentimes when we show people this is what 8% gets you, or 10%, or maximum of 12% gets you, the reality of it is you have years that are much better, and then of course we always have our bottomed out years, but the years that are much better always double and triple the bad years. So
Yes.
reality is if you get that savings plan in place, you're going to have a massive amount of money, a great foundation.
Yeah, 100%. And so, um, and guys, that's the foundation. Foundation is life insurance. Okay. You got to build upon the life insurance and the foundation, because if you don't have your life insurance taken care of, most people say their biggest asset is their car or their house. Well, how can your biggest asset be a vehicle? Because unless it's a classic, it's going to depreciate. Okay, unless it's a refurbished and remodeled, or it's a mint condition classic, it's not going to appreciate. It's going to depreciate. So that can't be your biggest asset. And then your home. If you stop paying your bills on your house, the bank repossesses it. How can that be your biggest asset? Look, your biggest asset is your income. Okay. Your income. If you were to die today, your income dies too. Your family can't pay for your funeral. They can't pay for your bills. They can't pay for the household. Their lifestyle is going to be so daggone worse. And then if you're a business owner, your business is going to crumble and die. It's going to be sold to another dude with a vision that you didn't have, with the purpose you didn't have, right? For your business. So that business goes away and it goes to the other man, and it goes to someone else, and it becomes something else that you had no vision of that being. So it's very important to have that life insurance in place so that you can fund your business after you die. You can fund your family after you die. What's recommended in today's world is 7 to 10 years worth of coverage. So if you got $100,000, let's say Johnny has $100,000, Johnny needs $1 million policy, 700,000 to $1 million policy. That's what Johnny needs to have in his most expensive years. It's not necessarily in his later on in life. It's not necessarily in his youngest years. It's in his most expensive years. With his most expensive years, you got kids in the house, you got a bunch of debt, you got mortgage to pay off, you've got you're married, and you got a job. There you go. Your most expensive years in your life.
That's
Go
called
ahead,
the
Jake.
time method. And that's something everybody needs to figure out. If they want to know how much they need, it's called the dime method. That's your debt, whether or not you want to leave money for your children's education, pay off the mortgage and expenses. So you just talked about, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you just talked about
No.
700,000 to $1 million in coverage. Part of the most people sit there and go, well, wait a minute, we only make 50 grand a year. Why do we need $1 million in coverage? Here's why. If you're going to pay off a $300,000 house, there goes $300,000. You're going to pay off $100,000 in student education for, 2 or 3 kids. There goes the other half of the money. Or the other half, another 300,000. That's going to leave you with about 500,000. And if you were to take $500,000 and put it into the right investment account, it'll spit out 50 grand a year, which replaces the income of the lost spouse. That's the whole purpose of that method and that provides, security for that spouse for the rest of their life. That's what they need to understand about that.
Right. Right. And it just goes to show, and it reiterates, that wise man building his house on the rock. That wise man building his house on the rock. When the rains came and the floods came, his house stood still, right? It may have shifted a little bit, but it stood still. And the guy on the sand, well, his house just got swept away by the financial curse, by the financial struggles, just swept away. And they go back, and I wanted to comment on this from you earlier, was that you were talking about fear. And anytime we operate out of fear, whether it's the fear of loss or the fear of lack, or having a scarcity mentality, right? When we have a scarcity mentality, we will never have a good foundation of our finances. We will always be swept away by the storms and the struggles that we have in our day-to-day lives, in our financial lives. Bowing down to the debt collectors. No, you tell the debt collectors, hey, I'll get you paid off when I'm ready. Good darn ready. What you need to do is you need to wait. I'm paying off this other guy so I can pay you. So be patient. You guys have the authority to do that.
Yep.
You guys have the authority to do that.
You're gonna be on the topic of debt collectors. Let me back up what you're saying right there. Once you've got to a place, if you're watching this and you're at a place where you have people other than the original creditor calling you, you're in a place where you obviously never intended on being, but you're in a place where you have more power than you realize anyway. Number one, it's probably already made it to your credit report. You're probably already suffering credit-wise, okay? So there's nothing more they can do to you. There's not debtor's prison nowadays, okay? They're not going to send you to jail over that debt. There's not debtor's prison. If you've got to a place where you got someone other than the original creditor calling you, means you don't have access to the line of credit no more. So I hate to say it in this such a firm manner, but you've at a point where you've blown a tire, you've blew it, okay? You've got to rebuild. So the last thing in the world I'm going to do is let debt collectors put me in fear. But Jason, that's what they do. They call you and they lie to you and they threaten you. I worked with a lady. This is a true story. I worked with a lady 2 years ago, got herself behind on mortgage payments and a bunch of other things. And that she had financed a mobile home. Now, if you know anything about getting your credit restarted, right? And you go to a used car lot, they have, second chance credit loans, okay? They're high interest, high pressure loans. They have the same for mobile homes and houses sometimes, high pressure, high interest loans. Well, she had one of these. And what they do is they have it set up where someone will call you 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, and they threaten you and they abuse you verbally, and they go right up to the border of being illegal, and in some cases are illegal. And she had got to that point. And so, one of the first things I did with her, I had her write an email and email them and tell them, do not contact me anymore. Do you know you can do that? Most people don't know this. You can tell them not to contact you anymore. And this woman went from getting 4, 5, 6 times a day threatened. And I listened to some of these calls she'd recorded. They asked her if she would take her stuff to the pawn shop. They're like, can you take the stuff you own to the pawn shop and sell it and send us the money? They did all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, they went from that, okay, to not being allowed to call her. And don't you know, it drove them nuts. But in the end, we ended up working out her financial situation, and she sold that place for a $20,000 profit and got rid of some other debt. So in the end, it all worked out. But you can't live in fear. You have to live in power. You have to, and here's part of how you get your power back. Part of how you get your power back is you start with a plan. You've got to get that pen and that paper out, and you got to know what's my income now, what's my outgo now, how am I going to divide this money up so that I'm saving, I'm giving, and I'm paying bills. And sometimes that means what's going to get cut out of my budget. What can't I afford? Might be the cable. It might be the kids can't play softball this year, or they got to go work cut grass for their own softball stuff. But there's a way to do it and not live in fear.
That's just unbelievable. And you know what? I was taking notes, by the way, because that was powerful stuff, man.
I thought
Because
she was probably playing Mario Brothers there while I was talking.
yeah, no, no, no. I was taking notes, man. And so, because this is good stuff, and even I didn't know some of that stuff as well. So that's really powerful. And I hope you guys, when you watch this episode, are being educated and educate yourselves in this. And this is a powerful episode because I wanted you guys to be on this to hear what we actually do, how we actually serve people, and how we can actually serve you if you're open and willing to allow us to. So, and
Absolutely.
these principles apply so much to our life, to our overall life, and having this foundation. And protection, having that life insurance is taken care of. Then we started talking about debt. Debt's building the walls. Here's the deal. Debt is like excess weight on your body. It weighs you down. It makes you groggy. It makes you struggle out of bed. You got a hurt back, hurt knees, and all that stuff. And if you're middle aged like JT and I, it's only compounded on that pain, right? Right.
That's
But
right.
again, we need to learn how to shave that weight off, and that takes it one step at a time, one
Yeah.
dollar at a time, $100 at a time, $10 at a time. Whatever you can do is that. We do that through what we call debt stacking, debt snowball, right? The Dave Ramsey principle that he didn't learn by himself. He learned through our former company,
Yep.
and that debt snowball. Um, we have this great program called the Expert Financial Analysis. It's complementary, customizable to each person's needs, and it takes your protection information, your investment information, retirement information, your savings, and your debt situation. And what it does is it calculates all that and tells you which debt you need to debt snowball first in order to get you out of debt the fastest and to save you the most on interest. So it's a really powerful tool. But right there, that's what you guys need to do. You need to do that, and you're not paying $99 for a package, by the way, to do it
Right.
by yourself. You do it with financial coaches like me and JT for free. Okay. All
I
right.
noticed there's three types of people when it comes to money, Jason. This is my experience. There's some people that they did well with their money, they made good decisions, and what they need is they need somebody come alongside of them and take them even a little bit further. There's people out there right now that are going to hear this that are say in their 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s, and they need to make some moves with the good choices they've already made to be able to take their retirement to the next level, or maybe get that money move from where they were saving it at into a vehicle that's going to pay them through retirement. They did the right thing. Then you have those people who are making it. Maybe they got a little extra money, maybe they're saving some money. Usually this is like the middle-aged moms, dads, kids are getting to be teenagers, and they know how it is to rob Peter to pay Paul, but for the most part, they're keeping their head above the water. They need a little bit of help in going to that next level to where they can really accelerate to be able to retire one day. But then there's those people that are drowning. And I'll tell you what I have learned about a lot of those people that were drowning. The word
Mhm.
that pops in my mind when it comes to them is embarrassment. People
Yeah.
they are too embarrassed. They're proud. They don't understand maybe how they made these mistakes, or maybe they don't understand the way the economy's worked against them for years, what have you. But at any rate, they end up in a place where they are embarrassed of where they're at. And what they don't understand is that most of the people I've met in this industry were people just like that, that came from a background of struggling financially and discovered how this, I mean, that's me. I knew how to make money. I didn't know how to manage money. And I had to go through all kinds of phases to get to a place where I met somebody that did a plan with me. Then I, in turn, started making those plans with other people. It wasn't that I was some kind of financial guru sitting up on a mountain one day. I was in my peak earning years, and I knew how to make some, but I did not know what to do with it. And my mentor showed me how to use this plan to get out of debt and to keep going forward. So sometimes I think if I could speak to anybody out there, I want to speak to some of those people that you might be a little bit embarrassed. You might not want to disclose what's happened. I mean, I can tell you this much. I shared this story. I think it was might have been last night. I shared a story of couples that have kind of came back together and healed their marriage where they were
Yeah.
financially separate ways, and they had to bring it back to one sheet of paper and one budget to be able to get ahead in life. We got to get over that embarrassment if we're going to go anywhere. So I would absolutely say, if you're listening and you don't have a foundation, you're just treading water, get over that embarrassment and reach out for help.
Yep. And seriously, because and let me tell you a little bit about me. So I was in at the time I was at Starbucks. I was a full-time barista. I was a part-time pastor, and I was a part-time martial arts instructor, right? And this dude comes in, and he brought me into the business back in '07. But he came in, and some goofy guy I haven't seen the whole time, and I knew all my regulars, right? And he comes in and he says, "Hey, I just want a vanilla latte," and I was like, "That's pretty generic." And this was back when
That's what I
Starbucks.
drink.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this was back when Starbucks was still a private company, right?
Right,
And so Howard Schultz was trying to train all of us to be managers of stores. He
right.
wanted to be leaders of stores, and so the training was connect, discover, respond. Connect, discover, respond. I'll never forget that. That was my intro to training of being in business for myself, but not by myself, believe it or not.
Good
But
one.
I didn't realize that until Daryl showed up one day and said, "Hey, um, I need a vanilla latte." And I said, "Great, man. What's your name?" And he says, "My name's Daryl." And I said, "Oh, great, Daryl. Hey, do you want it with regular milk? Do you want it with almond milk? Do you want it with whole milk, half milk? How do you want it? Do you want it hot? Do you want it cold? Do you want it half sweet? Do you want it real sweet? All right. And would you like an extra shot of espresso on that and a little kick for the rest of the afternoon? You know, and that was my upsell, right? You want an extra shot of espresso so it can give you an extra boost for the afternoon, you
Right.
know? And dude, I did that, and I was like, hey, you know what? Because you're new here, I'll make the drink for you. And so I went and made the drink for him, and got it all ready. And then when I was done and took care of a couple other clients, went to go sit down on my lunch break outside. The dude walks up beside me, and he says, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" And I said, "Hey, what, Daryl, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, Daryl." And so we start talking, and he says, "Hey, you ever heard of asset management?" And I said, "What the heck is that? I don't know what asset management is." You know, I know what management is because I'm one of the managers here, but I have
Right.
no idea what asset management is. And so he gave me a rundown. Assets is basically your income, your house, cars, any kind of investment portfolios. And I said, I don't have enough money. That's for all the rich people. And he's like, no, 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 it's for you too. And I said, really? And he said, "Hey, you see that guy over there?" It was convenient, but there was another dude sitting over there wearing this big ass ring on his finger. Pardon the language, but this big, huge ring,
Yeah.
right,
I know.
on his finger. And he says, "Yeah, that guy makes over six figures a year." And I said, "What's that? What's that mean?" He says, "He makes over 100 grand a year." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, dude, guy makes uh, guy makes almost 80% more than I do working at Starbucks, being a pastor and teaching part-time karate, right?" All right, I'm working 3 jobs, and this dude's making more than me, and he's sitting out having a latte. Had 3 actually. He was one of my regulars, and he didn't even talk to me. That was another thing. That
What?
guy didn't ever talk to me. The $100,000 earner didn't talk to me. This Joe Blow from Sapulpa, which was a 45 minutes away from my store, comes in and talks to me, right?
Right,
And
right.
gets me in. I stood him up for 3 weeks, not because I didn't like it or didn't want to, but it's because I kept forgetting about it. I didn't even know how to run a schedule back then, right? And so,
Wow.
yeah, it was unbelievable. I stood him up because I kept forgetting. And then he calls me up and he says, "Hey, man, our RVP's cooking up barbecue and brisket." And I was like, "Oh, I'm there." So I got there, and coming to find out, the RVP there said, "How cool is it when you can help somebody out with their financial picture and
Yeah,
set them free financially, but then you can help them spiritually because they trust you now." And I
that's right.
said, "I'm in, I'm in, I'm sold. Where do I sign?" And I bounced my first check joining our industry.
Ah, that's good. Let me tell you an asset management story.
Actually, that wasn't my first check that I bounced, but it was the first best check that I
That's how
bounced.
you got in. That's I heard that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
there's good debt and there's bad debt, but that's another episode. You know,
yeah,
I
exactly.
let me tell you what I heard about asset management. There's you can either there's one or two things that are gonna be working, okay? And this is what people got to get in their mind. Either you have your assets working for you, and that's your money invested in whether it's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, a business, whatever, or your ass is working. So it's either your
Yeah,
ass or your ass.
yeah,
And that's what I heard one time. And I'm going to tell you right now that that right there, that's what related to me because I was like, you know what? I don't want to be 75 years old, driving a truck or no, and look, there's nothing wrong with being a truck driver or whatever you want to be, but I
Oh
don't want
no,
to be forced to be in a labor position or a working position at 65 or 70 years old. And what's going on right now? Walk into any Walmart in America and you got somebody there 65, 70, 75 years old working 20, 25 hours a week because they have to, not because
yeah,
they want to. Now, some of them I think probably want to get out and be around people, but for the most part, if they had their choice, they would be on the road visiting Florida, retired, doing something like that. But they didn't understand that you either have to develop assets that work for you or your ass is going to work. And I'm pardon my
yeah,
language about that, but I heard that, and I believe that was Jake Frege from Louisiana that said that. I believe I could be wrong about that, but guy we
yeah,
know, and it's the truth. It's the truth. If you don't develop ways to make money, look, I have a guy, I have a client the other day hit me up. He said, I just got my taxes done. I got to pay $5,000 in state taxes. And I said, man, that's horrible. What happened? We kind of went over different things there. And he's like, I just can't, no matter how I do the math, I can't do it. I said, why don't you have a side business anymore? You used to, he doesn't now. Why don't you have a side business? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you had a side business and, you ran 1,000 miles, that's $650 in deductible, off your taxes. What about your computer if you need a computer for a side business or whatever it is you're doing? And I said, if you ran, we figured out the math of how many miles he would have had to run to have the right deduction to not pay taxes. And I'm like, here's the thing: if you just had that side business going, number one, you're developing long-term assets and long-term business income. I said, but you would not be paying taxes right now. And that's all from having a side income or a side business, Jason. It's a matter of when I go get in that car here in a little bit, I'm getting paid 65 cents a mile to drive my car. And people just don't understand that. And then maybe that's something we ought to really break down sometime. There's two tax codes in this country. There's one
yeah.
for the wealthy people and there's one for the working people. And if you're
Right.
not taking advantage of the one for the wealthy people, you're going to probably be a working person all your life.
Yeah, 100%. And I see it with family members. I see it with people real close to me, right, that are still working because they can't do anything else, and they're of that age that they should be, you know, retired in Florida or retired in Montana and doing their thing, right?
Right.
And that leads us into once we're freeing up that money and shaving off some of those pounds in our debt elimination and our financial unhealthy weight, right? And we want to build financial muscle. We want to build financial stability. We're
Yep.
going to eliminate that debt, and as we're decreasing that debt, that money that starts getting freed up needs to be put into a savings, but not really a savings, but a investment portfolio. Because going back to what you said about the parable of the talents, where the master said, "You saved your money. You could have at least put it in a fixed income annuity,
Right.
right?
Well,
That's
most
at
people don't
least
realize
getting
is you
you
don't
through
got to be wealthy to get
inflation."
that.
And you know,
Right.
and but instead he put it under his pillow, or put it in a savings account at the bank, earning 0.01% interest,
Right.
right? You did nothing with that money because
Right.
of you had a scarcity mindset. You didn't want to lose it. And by God, guys, if you invested in the market and you lose it, it's lost on paper. It's not lost in reality. Just let it ride.
Right. That boy, that's another one right there. That's a whole episode of people when I hear people tell me this all the time. Well, the market went down, everybody lost their money. No, the market went down. Your what went down was the size of your portfolio. You only take a loss if you sell it when it's down. The
Exactly.
idea is I love it when the market goes down. People think I'm crazy because I'm like, hey, you know what? It's on sale. That's
It
really
is
what
on
it is.
sale.
You know how
It's
we've been going through all this stuff when everybody said when Trump comes in, and I'm not talking about politics here, I'm just talking about what happened when he came in. The market, was going down because everybody was mad about tariffs. Well, guess what? That was the time to get in the market. They're beating up on Tesla. I'm sorry to see them doing that. I'm not taking a political stance on it, but now's the time to buy Tesla because
it
in
is.
a year from now, that's going to be over, and that Tesla's going to be $700 a share again, and it's on
Yeah,
sale
exactly.
right now for 250 or 350. That's what people need to learn about buying into the market. You only take a loss if you sell it at the bottom. But what happens is people see all their friends got in the market. Oh, I got some stock, I got a mutual fund, and the market's going up, and they buy when it's high. Then when it goes down, they get all upset and sell it. That's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get in it when it's low, or better yet, get in it every week. So you use what's called dollar cost averaging, but at least get in it when it's low and sell when it's high, or never sell at all. And that's the
Yeah.
purpose of that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's diversification is biblical wisdom. So invest in 7 ventures, right? Yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land.
Right,
Ecclesiastes 11:2. From the
right.
wealthiest man, by the way, 10 Elon Musks would would probably compare to the wealth of Solomon in today's dollars.
I'd
King
say so.
Solomon. 10 Elon Musks. I looked it up in a Skynet tool. It's called AI. you know, come with me if you want to live.
That's right. That's right. It would be if you want to
yeah,
live.
yeah,
I
but
keep
but
right over
but
here
yeah,
taking my cat
seriously,
out of the camera saying, get out of here if you want to live.
yeah, well, 100%. But yeah, Solomon, King Solomon, in Ecclesiastes 11:2, invest in 7 ventures. In 8, yes, you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. And diversification is so important. So you're not just buying into one stock, when it's on sale. Let's say I want a piece of Tesla. I want a piece of Amazon. I want a piece of Apple. I want a piece of Newsmax, right? Well, not right now because Newsmax is not on sale, but not today
Right.
anyway.
But tell
Newsmax.
everybody how you can do that. See that what people don't realize is there's one way that you can invest in 8 or more ventures in one fell swoop.
There's 2 ways. There's one way is with the traditional mutual fund, which
That's
is the
right.
the Series 6 licensed individuals, Series 7 licensed individuals can do, and
Yep.
then there's the RIA, which is the
Yep.
investing in advisory accounts,
That's
managed
right.
accounts,
That's right.
and we've got people on our team
That can
that
do
can do
that.
that for you.
That's right.
We do. We have people that are fully capable of doing that for you. So you're not just investing in one group or in one fund. You're really pulling together in that. And then
That's right.
also getting into our business and our industry. Did you know that investing into the financial services industry, you can earn income by 5 to 7 different ways? You got tax business, you got life insurance, health insurance, auto and home insurance. You've got debt elimination. You've got wills and trusts. Okay, that's 7. We crossed 7. Oh, we got mortgages, right?
Yep.
You know, I mean, so guys, financial services is a great way to invest in yourself and build a business as your side income. What was it that Jim Rohn said? He said, I think you said this earlier. Jim Rohn said, or no, it was Frank DeLeo. Somebody said it today, and they said, you know, your 9 to 5 pays your bills.
Right.
Your extra side business in the PM hours till midnight makes you generational wealth.
That's right. That's right. Everybody's trying to do it on one income now, and that's just not the case. If you were not raised in such a way that you grew into a business, inherited a business, or inherited some kind of money, then you have to find a way to make that money to be the one to break those generational curses. And your 9 to 5 will pay your bills, and your 5 to midnight is what sets you up for your future and gets you out of your 9 to 5. I mean that, and I think that sometimes when it comes to the financial services business, people don't consider it because they think they got to have all their crap together before they get into it. And that's just not the case. The truth is, you should get involved, if for no other reason, to learn how to handle your own money and get yourself out of your own crap. Then you can
Okay.
make money to helping other people do it.
And that's the same way with our spiritual life. Jesus didn't tell you to go fix yourself first. He
Right.
died for that. He
That's
took
right.
care of that. Took care of that debt. All you need to do is come over here, believe and trust in him, and have that deep, intimate relationship with him. Then it starts working out.
It's like
You
Jesus
know,
being
when
called the
you,
great physician. He didn't. He said he didn't come to save the people who need no doctor. He came for the people that needed a doctor, a spiritual doctor.
yes, and then out of that, we can be the financial doctors of everybody in that sense. And that's where it comes to, um, again, we don't want to eliminate this, but this is exactly where it's at. You go to the doctor's office and you get a proper diagnosis by putting the pressure cuff on, even though it's not compared to your symptoms. You got to put the blood pressure cuff on. You got to do your height and weight, even though it's not. You don't think it's comparable to your symptoms. If you don't think, but you're not the doctor, you're not the physician,
Right.
right? You're getting your blood checked. Well, why do I need to get my blood checked every single time I come to the doctor? Guys, it's a part of the process, it's part of the template, so that is it. They cannot do if they don't do that, they're subject to committing malpractice. And
Well,
see,
that's
that's
right.
where we come into play here as financial strategists, as financial leaders. Okay, guys, we have to diagnose you, because if we do not diagnose you we can't just be like, just give me 5 quotes. I can't give you 5 quotes. Do I know what you earn annually in your income? Do I know what your spouse earns annually in her income? How many kids do you have? What's your house? How much is that? How much of that is you're paying off? Is it paid off? Is it this? Is it that? What's your bring home income, and what are you outsourcing from that income? I don't know that. I can't properly diagnose you and replace a policy. I've committed malpractice, and then you're in a worse off position, maybe, or you're
Right.
just in the same position, maybe, instead of being in a better position. That's why it's clear that you got to have a blueprint for your house. You got to have a blueprint for your financial house.
That's
And
right.
the one thing that I've learned anyway is that you can't build something solid without the blueprint. And that's our expert financial analysis here. Other companies call it a financial needs analysis. We call it an expert financial analysis, but it's with us, it's complementary, it's customizable to your situation, and it tells you where you are and where you want to go and how to get there. But
Right.
with us guiding you through the process, it's free. You got to have the blueprint, guys.
That's right. That's where it starts, man. That's where it starts. I think that the big challenge for people nowadays is trying to go it alone, and you just can't go it alone. You wouldn't become a doctor alone. You're going to go get help. You're going to go to college. You're not going to do move up in your career without getting some help and some mentorship. You just don't do it. That's not how it works for the human race. You got to have somebody lead the way and walk with you. And I think that's the great thing about this business is that most all the advisors I've known in my lifetime are committed for a lifetime. I don't see people that are getting in and out of the industry that are really serious about people. The ones that are good, they're in this industry for a lifetime, and I've seen them walk with people for a lifetime. So,
Oh yeah.
that's who you and I are. So that's a great way to look at it, Jason.
And it's about alignment. It's really about alignment and bringing your financial strategies to that biblical standard, to that practical wisdom, and to that desired legacy you want to build and create for your family, and which leads to the roof, your financial goals and dreams, and your legacy.
That's
The
right.
roof, and I added legacy to that. We used to say financial goals and dreams made it about the person, but let's make it about the legacy because Bible talks very strongly about legacy. Talks
Yep.
very strongly about it in the sense that in Proverbs, was it 13? I think it was that says, 13:22. A righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children and grandchildren. Okay, it's not just about money; it's about the principles and wisdom and foundation in Christ Jesus our Lord. Yes, but what did Jesus talk about the most? Money,
Yep.
finance, getting your house in order. And
Yep.
guys, if you're not intentional about this process, you're leaving financial future vulnerable like the house built on the sand, right?
Listen, if you think it's hard enough for you, you know, people think it's hard enough for them right now. You can't figure out your finances. What are you doing to your kids? What
Yeah.
what what legacy? If you're struggling right now, you can't pay your bills. You don't know how you're gonna make ends meet. You're stressed out about marriage or money. Your marriage is suffering because of money. What do you think your kids are going to do? What do you think your grandkids are going to do? They're going to do what you're doing. So if you don't get your money in order for any other reason, get it in order for for your legacy. Do it so that you set an example for your kids and your grandkids. And I'm not talking about necessarily setting them up and leaving them tons of money. That's your choice. But what about learning how to save and be self-sufficient when you're retired and showing them how to save and make money so that they can be self-sufficient, good, productive members of society, and that your grandkids can continue that tradition. If you're struggling right now and you can't figure it out, that is exactly what your kids are going to duplicate. Exactly what they and so your legacy is going to be, well, my family's always been this way. My grandparents, they went back and lived with mom and dad. I guess my mom and dad are going to come and live with me one day. That's what it's going to be. Instead of my grandparents, man, they went off to their second home in Florida and we all went down there at Christmases or they flew in for Christmases or, whatever great financial legacy would be. But whatever you're struggling with right now that's exactly what your kids are going to do. It's going to happen. So, if you're losing a marriage because of money, your kids are going to lose marriages because of money. If you're not going to be able to quit working, probably chances are your kids aren't going to be able to quit working. So for them, and I know that's breaking it down to the minute level of legacy. The type of legacy that you and I want to leave is a godly legacy of the decisions we've made, but also a financial legacy so that when our kids look at us, they say, you know what? Dad got it together. Mom got it together. They really made something happen, whether it was late in life, middle life, or from the beginning, no matter what age you are. Think about that legacy right now.
And, And that rings so true, JT, and it pushes me back to that scripture, Proverbs 13:22 as well. And let's flip that on its head. An evil man leaves an inheritance of debt for his children
Mm-hmm.
and grandchildren.
Yep.
Let that sink in. You know, I mean, I don't want to be that man. You
No,
don't want to be that man.
that's right.
You know, who wants to be that man or woman if you're a single parent, right? But who wants to be that person? I don't want to be that person. I
Right.
want to be a good man. I want to be a righteous man that leaves that inheritance,
That's right.
right? Not leaving debt. You know, I
Yep.
don't want my kids to be slave to the lender, right?
That's right.
You know, and it goes, dude. You know, and and think about that. That's exactly what you were talking about. Was the foolish man, right? So, as a martial arts, finances, walk with Christ, alignment is essential. You know, and alignment in your finances shows people that you trust God enough with your finances rather than trusting in what you can do on your own.
You know what the biggest lie a foolish man tells themselves is a foolish man tells themselves they watch other disasters. They watch that guy build his house on the beach. Then they go down to the beach and they build a house on the same spot and they say, "Yeah, he didn't get it done, but I can figure it out." That's the
Yep.
that's the biggest lie they tell themselves. I can figure it out. No, no,
And
you
what
won't figure it out.
and what's the key word there? I.
Yep,
They focus. They stopped being selfless and they started being selfish
that's
and
right.
self-centered.
Yep,
Mm,
that's right.
man,
That's right.
wow,
Brother, it
unbelievable.
is 10 till, 9 till.
Well,
I'm
let's do a little taking action then.
yep,
Warriors. If you listen to this and you're realizing your financial house is out of alignment, don't wait for the storm to reveal itself again. Come
right.
on, start building on the rock today, and it starts with the EFA. Getting with me, getting with JT, and guys, we will have ways for you to contact JT. Where are the best places they can find you, JT?
Facebook. That's why I live on Facebook. Facebook.com/Jeremy Truax. Look for me there, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Or call me directly, text me directly, man. It's 443-239-1241. I'm good with that too.
Awesome, 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 guys. And the way to get a hold of me is also the big Facebook and TikTok and YouTube, where this is going to be
That's
live
right.
on or hit and on Saturday evening it'll be posted and ready to go.
Good
So
stuff.
appreciate you guys coming here and taking action. Again, if you guys need your EFA done, don't hesitate to contact myself or JT. My number is 918-604-6434. And you can reach me at Jason D. Murray. Find me on Facebook, YouTube, Bushin Lounge Radio Show. All right.
Great.
Thank you for tuning in to the Bushin Lounge Radio Show. If this episode blessed you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and let's keep building together until next time. Walk tall, stay sharp, and keep your house firmly planted on the rock.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much, JT.
Appreciate you, brother. I'll talk to you in a while.
Yes, sir.